So I'd love to hear from you what multipolarity means to you and what multi-alignment means and how it's different from non-alignment.
Just to complete it, I also use the word multi-vector so that you can go in different directions at the same time. So there's a multi-family out there. Look, if you stop and think about it, it's actually common sense. I was in the UN for the UNGA last week. And if you use the UN as a metric, there were 51 countries who started the UN, not all independent like us. There are 193. Now, if 140 countries, 150 countries gained independence since the Second World War, and then their economies, because gaining independence really meant that kind of squeeze which the colonial powers were putting on them was no longer there to that extent. Once they started their own production, their own consumption, their own economic growth, then it's only a matter of time before all of this starts to play into a redistribution of where economic activity is in the world. So if you look at, say, the top 20 economies in 1950 and look every 20 years, how that's changing, you can actually see multipolarity beginning to form. I would still say it's emerging. I think because if you use GDP as a measure, you get one set of prominent countries. If you use technology as a measure, you get another. If you use military capabilities as a measure, so it's not a single determination that one can make. But there is no question that there's ultimately a smell test. In the 1980s, when I first came here to Washington, so many more decisions would be made by the United States and Soviet Union, and often the two together. In the 1990s, I'd say late 90s, perhaps, so many more decisions were made by the United States alone. Today, if you were to look at any big global issue, it's important to have to carry other countries along, and that to me is an indication of how the world has changed, how much more multipolar it's become. It's not just become more multipolar, it's also become more regional. And that's a subset of that multipolarity, that you would have problems where you would often leave it to the countries of the region because the ability of the major powers to get involved in everything is less. The ability of the regional powers to contest the getting involved in everything is more. So you can have crises which essentially end up as something, where not everybody gets involved, not the big powers necessarily get involved. So now look at it from the perspective of a country like India. If we have more decision-making centers, more players of influence, more combinations in a way, then obviously you want to work with as many of them as possible. So you try to optimize your positioning and your relationships, which is why multi-alignment or multi-vector. And again, it depends on the issue. I mean, there would be a set of issues where, let's say, the US is a very natural partner. There may be issues where the US may not, and some other set of countries may be. So how do you, and as you get bigger, interestingly, your agenda increases, so the need for partners also grow. So to me, that rebalancing accelerated by globalization, leading to multipolarity, leads a country like India to look at multi-vector and multi-aligned policies, and that's essentially what we're trying to do.
And how is that different from the non-alignment of the 1970s, for example?
It's different for 2-3 reasons. One, we were, obviously our interests were more defensive then. Our capabilities were less. our contributions were less. I mean, let me give you a kind of example. You have these Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, okay? We are affected. All of Asia is affected because it's the main shipping line. Now, maybe 40 years ago, we'd have said something about it. Today, apart from saying something about it, you also send your ships and say, okay, we will make sure that we contribute to an international effort to secure the sea lanes. So it's the difference between the earlier era was it was more defensive, it was less capability driven. It was also less active in actually pursuing outcomes. Mm-hmm. So here you have a dog in every fight as you get bigger. So you can't say, I don't like it and I will stay away. You may not like it, but you still got to work on it in some fashion, directly or indirectly. And I think the willingness to take risks also increase because once you want an outcome, you can't be passive. So it's far more active, capability driven, and I would say more willing to make choices, because one of the characteristics of the non-aligned period was also there was a certain reticence about saying, okay, on this issue I need to work with you and therefore I'm willing to do that. I think that reticence is less. I mean, where our stakes are involved, you would not have had a Quad in the non-aligned era. You would have a Quad in a multi-alignment era.
That's very helpful and leads logically to the next question, which is perhaps even in a multi-vector, multipolar world, there is still room to recognize that the U.S. plays a very special role in that world. And as a practical matter, one could point to the presence of the UN, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank here. One can point to the role that Washington still plays, for example, in patrolling international sea lanes. Sure. One can point to the role of...
You don't have to convince me. Right. I'm not into into declinism.
I'm getting set up to ask you the following question. The tech industry in California. So with what aspects of that kind of U.S. leadership is India comfortable, and with what aspects of that is India perhaps concerned or might question it?
Look, there is no question that the United States still has a very unique position in the world order. For reasons of polemics or mind games or posturing, people may suggest otherwise, but even the people who suggest otherwise know the truth. At the same time, it's also a reality that the kind of dominance that the United States had in the 1950s, 60s, or in the 1990s, 2000, it doesn't have. So it's a kind of half empty, half full situation. Now, for us, which part works for us? Much of it does. I give you the example of Quad. If you look today on technology issues or maritime safety, security, or supply chain issues, or even the manner in which international institutions should be. I mean, there would be a lot which would be common with the United States. Obviously, there would be some because, look, we are a developing country. Our political history is different. Our actual interests in some cases, our trade interests or climate action interests may be different. So there would be areas of differences, but if you ask me, saying net, where do you come out? I think we come out very overwhelmingly on the side of a strong relationship, which is why actually the story, if one looks at Indian foreign policy for the last, say, 2 to 3 decades, it's really been a story of steady growth of India-US relationship, because I think successive administrations on both sides, going back, I would say maybe to late Clinton, Vajpayee, I would sort of pick that as the inflection point. I think since then it's been steadily on the up.